We are delighted to be here speaking to Ruth Jonen, a former board member who served on the board from 1985 to 2017. We are talking to Julie Wroblewski Bosshart. You've been serving on the board since 2011. You're speaking with Emily Gilbert, who has been a board member since 2021. You're here speaking to former library board member Bob Lyons, who served on the board from 1969 to 2013.
Right.
We are talking to current board member Jillian Bernas, who has been serving since 2015. And we're talking to Nick Scipione, who served on the library board from 2009 to 2015. And we are talking to Theresa Seyring, one of our board members. You began serving in 2015. We are talking to current board member Anita Forte-Scott, who has been on the board since 2005. And we are happy to have former board member Jack Lucas here to talk to us. Jack, you served from 1973 to 2007. We are talking to Carole Pye, one of our current board members. You began serving in 2021. We are talking to former board member Bob Frankel, who served from 1977 to 2017.
I saw the notice hanging on the door of the old Schaumburg Library indicating that they were looking for a replacement for a trustee who had moved out of the community. And I thought, well, gee whiz, I love coming to the library. Wonderful community resource, and I applied to join the library board, and I was very fortunate in being accepted by the other board members as a replacement to someone who had moved out of the community. So it was just by chance.
First, I served on a committee here at the library, and I knew a couple of the trustees or other people I knew them, and they were looking for some candidates to run an election because some people had been on the board a really long time and they wanted some new, fresh ideas, different people to get involved. So I think that was one of the reasons I had the committee that I was on. And I got involved and I decided to run. And at the time I was a stay-at-home mom with young children, and I wanted to represent mothers with young children, families in the community, because a lot of the people on the board were more like senior and they'd been on it a long time, so just give different perspectives. And then also the reason I ran was for fiscal responsibility and for continuing services and creating the kind of library that I had growing up, continuing it and refreshing it, and maintaining it for when my kids were older, that they could use it and enjoy it as much as I had.
I went to a session at the Illinois Library Association conference in 2017, being a librarian myself, and the session was all about library workers in public office, and there was a panel of presenters who were on library boards and school boards, and our one state rep who's a librarian, and they had talked about the many ways that librarians are well suited to being level-headed and well-informed and able to serve their communities. So I started thinking about it, and it was around a time when I was finding more of my voice and getting more comfortable speaking up, and I had always loved the library so much, so if I was going to get involved with something in my community, that seemed like a natural fit for me, because librarianship is also my career, and I was a heavy user of the library. And actually, when my husband and I moved in 2016, I wouldn't let him show me any houses that were outside of the library district because I was so determined to stay here.
I was a teacher at Conant, and that part of the idea was to give back to the community. And also I felt that I owed a debt to libraries. And I felt that growing up the library had given me a view of a wider world and it made a real difference in my upbringing. And I felt I owed it to libraries. And we had moved into Hoffman Estates in 1966. And so at that point I had lived in the community for, just a few years. And the library was a place that I went to and I wanted to do something with them.
Started to run for office in I think 2014 and then was elected in 2015. I had decided to make Schaumburg my permanent residency. I grew up in this community and had been living here pretty much all of my life, but I had been living abroad in Chile in South America for a little bit. And so when I came back, I just saw all of the wonderful things that goes on in Schaumburg. I had been a part of that growing up. I had gone to the previous library over on Library Lane and loved the library as a young girl, and then used it quite frequently in high school and college. In fact, I was able to save a lot of money on textbooks because I would come here and take them out of the library. And so I knew that I was going to be an adult in my community, that great things happen because people make them happen. They just don't happen on their own. And that means that if I was going to make great things happen in my community, I needed to take on a leadership role. And so I decided to run.
Thank you, and thanks for letting me be here. The reason why I wanted to join the board in 2009, there was an opening, and I applied along with a long list of other folks and interviewed for a position. I was on staff here in the library from 1999 through 2009, and I just loved this gem of our community, and I thought, well, maybe I can offer a little bit on the board. And I thought it was a long shot. I thought, no, there's not a chance that I'm going to be picked. I mean, the veterans on the board at the time were and still are awe-inspiring of their library knowledge, and behold, I was picked, and it was remarkable. And then I got elected to my own term, which was remarkable as well. So just being able to give back to the community, give back to the library that gave me so much was one of the reasons why I decided that I wanted to join the board.
I knew library board elections were coming up, and I also knew that one of our really cherished board members, Debbie Miller, was going to retire, wasn't going to run anymore, so I knew there was an opening. And I had some time that I was able to give to something, and I just felt like the library was a good fit for my skills and my interests, and I used to be an elementary school teacher and spent a lot of time in libraries, so I just thought I would do it. It was as simple as that.
That is something I remember very clearly. I was at a time in my life where my children were getting older and not needing their mommy so much at home. So I was really looking for a way to give back to my community, the one in which that I grew up in and had given so much to me throughout my childhood and adulthood. So a very good friend of mine, Bob Lyons, who was then on the library board for a very long time, and one of our mutual friends, suggested that I come to a few board meetings for the library and possibly run for a seat, something I had never done before. So I did run in the 2005 spring election, and I was elected and have been subsequently since then. And I've just really enjoyed my time as a library trustee, considering I grew up in our library here in Schaumburg at our previous location. I can remember going downstairs and reading lots of books in the gingerbread house.
Mike Madden asked me in 1973, I think he was worried that he wasn't going to, probably somebody went off the board and he was worried he wouldn't get enough people to run. So I think that first time I ran unopposed. I don't know for sure, but it seemed like that. So anyway, that's how I came to run. I thought, well, it'll be a good experience.
I decided to join the library board because I was already an advocate, and that makes me a hyper advocate now. And the library has always been a go-to place for me and my family, and I want that for future generations and for other families in our township to say that.
I was talking one day to the township assessor named Scott McEachran, and he and I were talking. I said, you know, I've always liked libraries, and I would like to do something with the library. He said, why don't you run as a trustee? And I said, okay. So I did. I had no idea what the trustee did. I didn't know anything really about the operation of the library. But I said, let's do something for the area that
When I joined the library board, the impression of the library would have been strictly as a patron. As an avid reader, bringing my kids to the library, it was very much from the perspective of being a patron. And I knew very little, if anything, frankly, about what was required of a library trustee, what the requirements were, what our responsibilities were going to be. So it was as you become a member of the board, then you learn, number one, what your responsibilities are, and then your perspective changes from one of a user to someone who is going to provide some kind of direction and, frankly, accountability to the taxpayers.
There were a lot of people that had been on the board for a long time, and I was lucky enough to get to serve with some wonderful people like Bob Frankel, Bob Lyons, Ruth Jonen, I'd be forgetting somebody, Debbie Miller, that's who I was trying to think of. So just visionaries for the library, people that had set aside money and planned well, expanded the library, and so I felt like I was kind of listening a lot at the beginning and learning a lot and absorbing everything. And then over time, I got to be in more of a leadership position. Although they did really press me to become treasurer right away because I'm a CPA, I have a financial background. So I was helping a lot with that right away. And that's where I felt like I could always contribute if there was some kind of financial question or helping with budgets, things like that.
I think I probably just have a better appreciation for some of the staff and their talents that I may not have had. I may not have gotten such a strong perspective of as a patron, but I always really appreciated the facilities and the collections. But having gotten to know more of the staff now as a board member, I just feel exceptionally lucky for us to have the staff we do. They really make our library what it is.
The people on the board did not trust me going into the service. I was a Republican, and I think they had some concern that I was doing this for political purposes, and it took me a while to, I suppose, show them that that was not the case.
It has. So I like this question because I saw our library as our community library. It was a wonderful place. It was a big library with lots of resources, and it was comfortable to go, especially when they built this modern facility. I remember in high school going in the first time and seeing how beautiful it was. I learned that we're pretty unique. Our library nationwide, not just statewide, is a leader in library services. And so that really impressed me. I didn't realize that before being on the board, that it was it was innovative, it was thinking ahead, it was so big, but big not just in size, but big in possibility and the services it provides to its community.
Well, it's interesting that when you go from the trenches to the board, right, you see the library and the organization at a whole new level, right? You know it from the day-to-day operations piece. You know it from what it looks like when you're a circulation clerk or audiovisual clerk or help with reception. Those are some of the positions I held. But then see the organization and what it takes to run from that macro level. And the folks on the board at the time that I joined, just the wealth of knowledge that kept this place great, and you know, financial knowledge all the way through library knowledge, serving in the library roles all the way at the national level, was remarkable. So I was a learner in those first few years, even though I thought coming in, hey, I've got some experience here. I know what the library's like. I've been in the organization for 10 years. I know I've been in the community my whole life. I didn't see anything coming. I sat at that table and learned so much from those stalwarts of our community, really.
I knew how extremely valued and cherished the Schaumburg Township District libraries were. People, it's not over emotional to say people love their libraries in this community. They've always been extremely supported and used. My own children grew up in the building on Library Lane and have a lot of happy memories of that. I had some goals, and I knew that we were one of the top flight libraries in the state of Illinois, with our 3 libraries, and I had a goal that I wanted to keep it that way because it had always been highly regarded. I lived in Schaumburg, oh my gosh, 40-some years, and there was always a good library and highly regarded. So I think that was one of my main goals, was it was a duty not to let that slip if I was on the board. And I think that probably still is my main goal. I probably still do, worry about, and I don't mean keeping up with other libraries. I mean just being the best we can be, and offer the best services and take care of the patrons in the best way, because it's just a community that loves that. Loves that.
Well, as a lifelong library user, not only through my childhood and adulthood, but also bringing my children to programs and them being a library user, my impression was that we always were very blessed with a very wonderful library and branches in our communities. So my impression was that it was a very well-run, well cared-for library that really catered to the needs of our public and our patrons in providing great services, also reference information for people who are looking for studies, and then also programming to keep us busy and engaged. So my impression was that we were already a world-class library, and I was really eager to become a part of it.
Okay.
Well, I remember the first board meeting, I was very impressed with some of the board members. I mean, they seemed so knowledgeable about the library and about the community. And I had just been in the community for 4 years. So I was really impressed with the quality. And what changed over the years was we always had at least 5 what I would consider really good board members. There was a lot of respect, but I felt, as time went on, I felt more on a par with them, not looking up, and I think with that respect, we didn't always agree, and so many did. A number of the times we voted 4-3 for a particular issue, but there was no backbiting. I mean, you went on, and that was it. And I think that kept me on the board, because I really felt the respect for these people, that we would give our opinions, how we felt about an issue, and then however the vote came, and we'd go on to the next issue. So I really respected that.
My impression of the library was always that it was essential. It gave me information, my students information at every stage of their life and my life, my seasons that I went through. And it is essential to our community. It's the heart. Also, that did not change. And it was enhanced. I understood, and I continue to understand, the complexities of this library and all the wonderful services that it offers.
I live in this, so decided to do this. And when I came on the board, I discovered a few things. Number one, the people on the board were there because of only one thing: they wanted to make the best library in the state. And 2, we had a library director, Mike Madden, who was a superb personnel manager, And right away, you learned that you make policy as a board member, you do not get involved in operations at all. And that was a really important lesson to learn on day one. So there were some people on the board that had been there, remained on the board with me for many, many years, and they were all good tutors.
I don't know that I had any particular goals personally. I think the more important thing is what were the goals of the library? What did the library want to achieve? And then as a trustee, how can you work with the staff, with the other trustees to meet the goals that the library itself establishes? And that's very much, during long-term planning, retreats, etc., going forward, that's when you learn to help establish those goals. So in terms of how did they change, the word technology comes to mind. Technology changed everything, as did the demographics of the community. When we moved here in the early 70s, there were very few people of my advanced age now, and a lot of young people with young children. The demographics, the racial, ethnic makeup of the community has all changed. So as life changes, goals change. And I think probably the goal of being the best library we can be for all of the people has always been the overarching goal. The little pieces below that are the things that may have changed.
So much has changed. It's kind of creating the library of the future is something that over time I realized was so important, because the way people use the library, they use it in traditional ways, but also in other ways. We have the library of things now. We have more use of computers, technology. You can do a lot from your home even for the library. And as we went into COVID, some of these changes in programming, but my overall goal was to keep the essentials and build on that for the library, and do that within fiscally responsible ways. So stay within our budgets, save for the future, and updating the facilities became something that was going on when I first joined, and it's continued to be part of the discussion with the board to make sure that we maintain what we have and keep the level of service really strong.
I think the demographics and everything are probably the same since a year ago, as far as we can tell. My goal was to be a voice for underrepresented populations. I strongly believe in, lifting up marginalized voices and incorporating anti-racism into as many of our policies as we can. I'm also, to my knowledge, the only queer person on the library board, so I thought it was important to have a voice from the queer community. And yeah, all of that is still pretty much the same. I think I just have a much better sense of what our collective goals are as a board. Obviously much more involved in things now than I was before. So yeah, but I would say that's still the same.
From the time I joined the board and talking to Mike Madden, it was obvious that the philosophy of the Schaumburg Township Library was to provide for people the things that they wanted. And so if our most engaging book was how to repair your car, that's what we had a lot of. And I thought that was correct. I thought that's what the library should be doing. And as time went on, we became more interested in buying audiovisual material and very definitely children's books.
So I knew coming in that I wanted to be a voice for my community on the board. And I know there's 3 things that board members do, and so this isn't necessarily highlighted as a strong point. We are responsible for budget, we're responsible for strategic planning, and we're responsible for hiring an executive director. And so my 4th one I always like is that I am the community's voice on the library board. And so the executive director is advocating for the library, and the board members do advocate for libraries, but I also want to make sure my neighbors' voices are a part of that conversation. And so that was one of my goals. That continues to be my goal today. And I do bring everyone that talks to me about the library, I do bring that information, good and bad, to the attention of our executive director. And I continue to be that voice for the community. In terms of it changing, I think I have a better sense of how important the library is for people and their lives, and how it's really across all ages, the place where lots of people depend on the library for services, for programs, for education, for materials, for entertainment, and how varied that can be. And so I want to make sure that my role on the board isn't just one of voicing the community's interests, but also making certain that the resources are used well, so that we are around for years to come and are able to service our community members the same as they've always expected our services to provide for them.
When I began my tenure on the board, when I was appointed, like I said, I was basically learning how to be a board member. I was learning what it was like, at that high level, learning from the veterans on the board. So I tried to not overshoot my skis, if you will. I tried to learn before I shot my mouth off. But I felt like I did have a voice in terms of I would be able to communicate some of the things I knew from the trenches, if you will. I'd be able to be the eyes and ears of folks that, could have some quality conversations with board members, and they usually do, because board was very open to folks throughout the entire organization. So one of my goals was to make sure, staff input was heard at that board level. Not that we weren't in the past, or not that staff members weren't in the past, but I think just making sure that focus of bottom-up leadership is seen, and I think that was one of my goals. Once I got on the board, I realized that it was there, and there was a lot of opportunities for staff reports and folks to, actually get into the library spaces and learn from people. What I didn't know early on in my tenure, the District 54 connection in terms of the diversity of languages that were in the district, and then also our partnership with District 54 with the library, I was shocked. And the amount of connections we have to the diverse community and what the library can offer to our population. And that was something that I thought was not only a gem of the community to be able to offer that, but to be able to have the resources and structures in place to grow that and to help all populations. So that I learned that would be one of my passions, to help and help foster growth too. Technology, as well, as we can see in the 21st century, was changing. The library in that time from 09 to 15 was changing as well. The direction from when I was on staff in 99 through 09 was a lot of checkouts and circulation of materials, right? In the audiovisual world, or in the book world, to more of a space that would be utilized for meeting, a space where people can connect, technology-wise, giving folks different avenues to utilize resources that maybe they don't have because of a low-income population. So it was a very important time for me to see that transition time, and to learn from that and try to hopefully offer a voice to help with that transition.
I got the impression from day one that library staff, administration had always promoted and provided materials and programs and services with the careful consideration of our patrons and our community and what the needs were and what was available in technology and untold resources that maybe I had never used and didn't even know about. And I think as our demographics and technology changed, just over the last 7 years when I've been here, as that altered, we altered our mission every time. So I think very highly of the library.
So by far I was the youngest trustee on the board when I joined, and so my goal then was to really sit back and listen and learn and do a lot of research in between our board meetings so that I could really have a great grasp of an understanding of library operations, because we're so much more than just the books or materials that we loan out to our patrons, as well as our programming and on different services we offer. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in order to have a well-run and sustainable library into the future. Things that have changed that I've noticed over the time, even just in 16 years, the use of technology, especially like pocket technology, our phones, our tablets, our watches, are so much smarter now than they were then and can do so much more. So being able to still communicate and offer the services and the materials that people are looking for, even on their devices, has been a big change over the years.
The goals were always very general in terms of how I looked at it. You wanted to give the best service for the price, for what people were paying in taxes. But it wasn't like we were always trying to get the lowest possible thing, because I can remember one time Mike came with a budget for us, and we said, we got to spend more in certain areas. So we actually increased the budget from what he asked. So all I'm saying is we would look to see both the service as well as what we were levying, and what changed, I don't know, the demographics changed and we would go with it, so I mean that played into it. And we'd have planning meetings once a year, and they'd serve pizza, and we'd look at what was changing and what we needed to do. So I think we worked together to come up with whatever the goals were.
Good questions, and yes, I kind of did have like a little focus, and it's still there, and that's that there's more card holders. I'd like to see the percentage from 60% go up to 100%. Technology is rapidly increasing, of course, and the library continues to adjust. I continue to adjust and learn, and I also had a goal of community partnerships. There are a lot already, but I just wanted to make sure that continues and continues in a greater way, and that has already happened with D54 and D211.
Okay.
We were a nice little library, and we were not by any means the largest in the North Suburban Library System, which included all the libraries north of the city of Chicago, through the Fox Valley, and up to the Wisconsin line. And of course, at the end, we were by far the largest in terms of circulation and prestige and national recognition. But I believe that the goal of just having a library that served everybody in the community was a philosophy that I think everybody that served a long time on the board was adhered to, and we were very, very lucky that we had the support of the community the whole time. The goals never change. The mechanisms to get there are considerably different.
One of the ones that I remember, and it's funny in retrospect, was the decision whether or not to provide electric typewriters. And that sounds funny, but in the day of manual typewriters, buying an electric typewriter, that's kind of a big deal. And then when we first began to get involved with computers, and that to me was the beginning of the end of my ability to keep up with technology, because that then began, should we have public access computers? That was a big decision. Should we even do that? How do you allow people to use a resource like that? What kinds of programs, what kinds of access are you going to have? That to me is just, that was a real watershed. And when you think about the things that we've purchased, the other big area would be AV. In the olden days, when they had tape, reels of tape, and records, LPs, those kinds of things. And over the years, how the kinds of audiovisual materials have changed and simply don't exist anymore. And we've joked a little bit about that from time to time, that you don't want to ever invest too much in any kind of technology, because 6 months later there's going to be something better. So I think technology probably was one of the biggest changes. And from a personal perspective, because I'm not a techie, one of the things that I understood the least, and to me was a personal challenge. I keep thinking the computer age is going to go away someday, and I don't think it is.
Yeah, one of the things that happened right when I first started had to do with our budget, and we were leasing out our old facility, and the lease was done, and so we had a little bit of a budget shortfall. We had to look at our budget and make some adjustments, and it had to do with an agreement we had with Elk Grove Village, where we gave them funding. We shared a portion. It had to do with something that happened a long time ago. And then we were kind of changing our agreement. We voluntarily shared some of our budget with them. And you have to always be looking at what you can do with the money you have, what shortfalls you have. But the great thing is that the library is debt-free, and that happened right around when I first joined the board. So we don't have to pay pension, like with unfunded liabilities. We don't have any debt. So we've really kept it fiscally sound, and the management has really worked well with the resources they've had. They've been able to always spend, responsibly and be well within our budgets, and we're able to save money and be able to do facilities improvement over time. So even though we've had some challenges to our budget, initially when I joined, they thought we would have to go for a referendum to get additional funding, but that didn't end up happening. So I did recently, after 10 years, I went back and looked at some of the things that we were talking about in that first committee when I first joined, and it was interesting to see how things had turned out. And some things that we were concerned about, they didn't really end up being as big of an issue as we thought they might be, because we were able to tackle things slowly over time and do it in a responsible way. We've done really well with our budgets.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is the second floor renovation, because that predates me being on the board. I've been going to board meetings since late 2017, and that has been something that's been talked about for many years now at this point. So I'm glad that we are now moving forward with that after having stalled on it for a while. So that is obviously a huge issue, because it's just a massive amount of space, and it hasn't really been redone since the library was built. So it's really important that we keep the facilities up so the public has a functional but also aesthetically pleasing space to study or read or do whatever they're doing.
Enlarging the library. We did it a number of times. And we also got a branch library in Hoffman Estates. The village of Hoffman Estates had a fire department station that they had closed. And the mayor said that he'd love to have a branch library there, and he sold it to us for $1.
I think that some of the bigger issues as of recent have been focused on how we're going to use the resources we do have from our community to make sure our library is sustainable into the future, and it's a place that continues to invite people into its doors. And so some of the bigger undertakings have been renovations to the first floor. I know that we've been trying to keep an eye on how our infrastructure is aging. That's something that people might not necessarily think about when they come to our library, but we have a huge building. There's a lot of components that need to be well oiled and kept up to date, and so we're trying to, we just recently undertook as well a strategic plan that has been a great undertaking, as well as various overarching administrative responsibilities to make sure the library is sustainable and using resources well. So it's, I think those things that maybe you come to the library and you see books and resources and places to meet people and programs to attend, but this building needs to be taken care of, and those are some of the things we've been planning for and will need to continue to plan for into the future.
Big issues come to mind in my tenure, 09 to 15. One of them was we had a bond that was expiring. And so during that time, we had to decide what we were going to do, let it expire, renew it, what were those resources going to look like for the library. We've always had phenomenal budgets. I learned from Bob Frankel, who was a longtime trustee, and others on the board of what that budget process looked like. We had a situation with Elk Grove Library as well, because there's a long partnership with, I was a resident of Elk Grove, I grew up in Elk Grove Village, but also Schaumburg Township, so there was a discussion on how that would work. This teen center that we're in right now was part of those discussions. What is this going to look like going into the future? How are we going to re-envision the library? And what would circulation look like in the future? And so those were some of the major topics we had to discuss, and it was great that we had folks with 40 years experience and folks with 3 years experience, to have those dialogues.
The first really big issue that I was involved in was the first floor remodel, and that was huge. The planning, the discussion was extensive. The exterior of the building and the interior of our building, we're seeing 20 years of much loved use. And the Central Library was seeing just a little under 1 million visitors a year, which is a huge amount of traffic. And the way people use libraries was changing. And I think we were cognizant of that, and I think there was a lot of thoughtful planning about how to better use space and provide better materials for our patrons. The other one, of course, in everybody's mind was the Covet Pandemic, which I'm sure none of us will ever forget. That was huge. It hit the whole world. Insofar as our community in the library, we faced unheard of challenges, and we were trying to keep everybody safe at the same time as trying to continue to provide services and communication and a feeling of still belonging, even though nobody was hardly seeing each other. And the staff had to get really creative. Everybody got really creative. What could we do? The board spent a lot of time talking about it. Certainly the staff, the patrons, administration, everybody. It was one of the most complicated things. I'm sure none of us imagined in a million years we would ever work through something like that. Ever. I hope we don't again.
Some of the biggest issues that I can remember the board having to work with is, first of all, building the Hanover Park branch library, where we used to have a smaller space in a little strip mall, being able to gather or gain that land where the building now is, working in conjunction with Rodney Craig and the Village of Hanover Park to design and build that building so that there was a true community neighborhood library for people to use in a larger space. I think that was a very major accomplishment that the board, when I came on, was already working on, and it was in the works, and then I got to see it to fruition. Another large thing that is in my mind when you ask that question is the time when our agreement with Elk Grove Village had to come to an end. For many, many years, we would rebate a portion of Elk Grove taxes back to citizens living in Elk Grove Village, but were in Schaumburg Township. And at that time, those particular homeowners or landowners, people who lived there, were blessed with dual library full privileges, which no one else has access to. You have reciprocal borrowing privileges to other libraries, but your home library is your home library. So instead of looking at our finances and asking the rest of the township and our taxpayers to pay more to help cover that portion, as well as some growth plans that were in the works, we instead stopped that agreement, and we did hold some community meetings where people understood where we're coming from, and others that just did not want it to happen. But here we are 12 years later, 10 years later, and everyone is still very well involved with whatever library they wish to go to. And they have the rights and the privileges to do that. So that was a major issue that we had to face at that time. A lot of remodeling projects in the main building, constant remodeling and upkeep at the branches. You know, facility maintenance is so important so that people have a clean and safe environment to come into. Obviously, tackling all the issues having to do with the recent pandemic, that was a very big issue as well, that we've hopefully gotten to the other side of.
Well, in the beginning, we had issues like Roselle and Elk Grove wanting to, they wanted to annex all the municipal territory in Schaumburg Township for them. Then there were issues around the branch at Hoffman Estates. At first, we took over the fire station, and then we took over a part of the village hall, and so there were issues around that. And then later, of course, the big issue was building the central library.
I'd have to say COVID mitigations, and I'd have to say collaborating on the strategic plan, and our ongoing discussions of the second floor remodel.
There were a number of events during the period of time, probably culminating in the changes in the demographics of the area. The coming of age of computers, and one of the first decisions that I was ever forced to make, the first year I was president, and never ever knew anything about this, was a decision: do we have computers in the library? Do we have a central computer in the library? Or do we house it at the North Suburban Library System? And it was a 3-3 vote. And I can't even remember the reason I said, let's house it here, because they said, I think this library is going to continue to grow. And it was probably one of the best decisions the board ever made, because we were able to do so much with it. And which, by the way, is the reason that I finally left the board. There was a meeting in 2017. They're talking about all the things you could do with the computer now. And Ruth Jonen and I looked at each other, and immediately there was a recognition that we didn't really want to learn all this. And our 40 years were up. My 40 years were up. Her 30 years were up. So that we didn't run again.
When we decided to build the branch library in Hoffman Estates, we selected an architect and a design that we thought at the time would be good. It was not. And that decision, it wasn't the decision to have a branch library. That was a great decision to build our own library. The thing that I think we could have done better was we selected the wrong, what I believe to be in retrospect, perhaps not the wrong perhaps not the right design. And that's something that, again, it's, eyesight is, hindsight is always 20/20. And in looking at the issues that we've had with that particular building, that would have been a decision I would have perhaps done a little bit differently.
I can't really think of anything. I can't really think of anything that I would change.
Not yet.
I don't know if you were here when the American Nazi wanted to come and use our meeting room and speak. And there was a real concern, and we were quite familiar with the earlier episode, not by him but in others, that were of the so-called Nazi persuasion that spoke in Skokie. And so while we were committed to having the room be available, we were also quite concerned as to what would happen. And so we worked with the village of Schaumburg because it was in this building. And there was a point where we must have had 7 or 8 different agencies that were working to provide security and to try to have some control over what would occur. And there was a point where I realized that we, the board, were no longer in control. I really felt bad on that afterwards, that we should have tried to remain in control. I don't know if it would have been possible. So that was a fairly, just a one and done, but it was still something that we looked at of whenever there is a situation like that, the board should try to remain in control, and we weren't.
I think that sometimes you might look at the board minutes and say like, oh, well, everyone's in agreement. How is that possible? But we're 7 people. We have our disagreements. We have conversations about it, though. So I think our board has traditionally been very good at having making space for conversations in our board meetings. We don't necessarily always vote on things right away. It comes after meetings of talking with each other and kind of bringing in different ideas, things that I think of, other people don't think of, but then things that I don't think of, I'm always reminded by fellow board members of, and I find that really beneficial in the conversation, and then we're able to make a decision. So I don't think anything has been poorly handled and we should have done it differently, because we had really talked about it a lot before making final decisions. I have voted before no on things, and it was just because the ideas that were presented to me just did not get me to yes. And I think that's okay to have disagreements, but then we try to, once decisions are made, move forward and do what's best for the decision that was made.
Yeah, looking at all the decisions, what I liked about the way the board worked is we knew that we had one employee, and that was the director of the library. But we also treasured what the director, staff, and the employees told us coming to the board. So we felt like we needed to gather all information before we made a decision. I don't care if it was financial or in relation to day-to-day operations. We weren't just going to shoot from the hip. And so I learned from the board that we needed to have dialogues, and we needed to make sure that we made these decisions in a timely manner, but at the same time give it the justice it needs and the dialogues it needs, and not just think what in our hearts this is best and we've got to pound the table and make it happen. One of the decisions I referenced the bond referendum that we talked about, and I can remember, I believe Bob Lyons was president at the time, and we had to decide, were we going to renew these bonds or not? And early on we said, well, yeah, it makes sense. We'll just renew them, keep them in place. People's taxes don't go down. They're just same rate. And we had listening sessions at all the various, the 2 branches, and then here at the Central Library. And I was in charge. Bob couldn't make it, so I was in charge of the Hanover Park branch listening session. And the listening sessions, both at the Central and Hoffman Estates, were relatively benign and not a lot going on. Well, it got a little heated at Hanover Park, and there was a lot of folks that didn't understand how the money was being spent, and it was a great lesson for me. Great lesson in democracy, great lesson in feedback from our constituents, great lesson on making a decision, right, with a lot of stakeholder input, right? And so I think we got out ahead of our skis, and the board actually did reverse and say, hey, we, after looking at the input from our stakeholders, looking at what we have available in our funds and our budgets, we are not going to go to referendum to renew those bonds. And folks saw $20 to $40 decrease in their tax bill, but that could be significant. And if you don't need the money, why ask for it? So in the future, I think we wait on those decisions before making them and then asking for input.
Yeah, I thought about that too, and by nature, I am an overly laborious person when it comes to decisions. I don't make quick decisions for good or for bad, and I always am looking to figure out what was the impact. I don't want to make a mistake. I want to get it right. I don't want to look back, in everything in life. And I brought that to my library work also. I don't remember, I thought hard, I don't remember any specific issues that didn't go well, but I think that also goes to the fact that the other people I've worked with were also thoughtful, and I don't ever remember us rushing to decisions, just the people I've worked with for 7 years, that everybody earnestly tried to come up with whatever problem we were facing, whatever was the best decision with the information we had at the time. So I don't look back and think, oh, we blew that one. I think we did okay.
That is a very good question. Oh, I'm sure that there were some that maybe I thought of afterwards, but none that I ever regretted. Always in our library meetings that I've experienced, there's been very good discussion between board members, whether they were pro or con an idea. And I believe that everyone that I've always worked with always had the best interests of the library as a whole at heart and in their minds. So whichever way a decision would go would be for the betterment. Some of the things that were difficult to really navigate, I think, was when Mike Madden, our longtime library director, retired, and we had to find replacement for him. That was a process that we hadn't really faced before at that time, but we did handle it by taking enough time and consideration of all applicants and doing extensive interviews to find a good fit after he retired from the library after being such a key member for 40 or 42 years. So that was another thing that I don't regret hiring others, but I just know that that was a large decision-making process.
There was a very controversial speaker that wanted to speak at the library, and I can't even remember his name, but he generated a lot of hate. And so we were talking about what the violence that might occur and what the problems in law enforcement that we required. So we voted to not allow him to come, but then they took it to court, and the court said we have to allow him to speak, so we had no choice. It turned out, I guess it was okay. We didn't have any major problems, but there was a lot of law enforcement there, and I'm not sure who paid for that, because there were talks about maybe we'd have to pay something to some other, because that was a big bill in terms of the law enforcement who was present.
No.
Some of the major decisions, obviously, were deciding to build a new library. Now, we always had meetings with the senior staff, called the management team. And when we were deciding what we needed the space, we needed another addition. Everybody was dreading it because it would have been a different level. It would have been another heating plant, another cooling plant. We were talking about it, and then the head of circulation at that time, Jane O'Brien, said, why don't, Town Square is available, why don't we just build a library there? They would like us. And the minute she said it, we said, my God, what a wonderful idea. And that's how we came to Town Square. And we built a 165,000 square foot library. Even with that addition, it would have been so cumbersome to have built that addition on. And once we made the decision, then the next decision was architect and the way we wanted the building to look. And we looked at what they were building there. It was all red brick. It was prairie style. We wanted prairie style because it reflected the time. But we didn't want what they had. And we contracted with the architects, and they brought in a whole bunch of drawings. And we looked at them and we said, that's not it. That's not what we want. Come back and try again. They came back a second time. They tried again. We said, you got one more chance. And that's when they came with the building that you see today. And I think it's really a superb building. We never made, as a board, any decisions on the interior of the building design in terms of how much space would be allocated and where it would be allocated to. Simple reason, we didn't know anything about the traffic patterns. We didn't know anything. We're not librarians. So we could make a decision on how the building looked, but the inside we left to the management team. I think the next major decision that the board had after the building was when Mike finally retired, and we had to make a decision on a new library director. And the board interviewed, we set a series of questions, we interviewed, and we made a decision. It was a lousy decision. And luckily, again, the management team came to us and said, have you considered these things, this, and this? And we think that the new Stephanie Sarnoff would be the right person for the time because she's a futurist, and that's what we need at the library right now. And so the decision of ours was a very simple one. The staff knows what they're doing. And since the director is the only employer, she's the only employee that the library board hires, let's go with them. And that was a great decision because we were going through a period of rapid technological change, and she thought about it in a future sense. So I think that was really good. The only one, and I hesitate to say this, is we were very pleased with this building. Then it came time to build the new Hoffman Estates branch. And our decision on the architect of that would not have been the best decision in the world. And I think
one of the events that I look back on very fondly was the grand opening of this building. We went through a muddy, groundbreaking in Times Square, in Town Square. And the big decision was to move from the old library to this one. And that was the big decision that was, I guess, sort of groundbreaking for us. But once we made that decision and moved here, the grand opening that we had a small event in the evening with champagne and elected officials. And the following day, I believe, was the day that we opened to the public. And I have pictures of my grandchildren, who at the time were about 2 and are now in their 20s, going through the Enchanted Forest. And every time I come in here and I see the Enchanted Forest, I see Parrish and Emma as toddlers in the Enchanted Forest. So, those kinds of memories are wonderful. The other things that I remember very fondly are the holiday parties, the staff picnics, the opportunities that as board members we had to interact with and meet with staff members on a much more personal and informal way. How many times we have been in that big meeting room upstairs right here for those kinds of events and the retirement for Michael Madden, you know, those kinds of times that were so special for so many people, and I don't think we really appreciate them at the time. And all of a sudden, you look back and say how fortunate we were to have worked with such extraordinary people.
There's a lot of things. As a trustee, you get to be involved in things like parades. I got to march in the parades and represent the library and see how much the community really treasures the library when I'm involved with that. Different things like different trainings here at the library I was involved in. Interacting with all the employees was really important to me. Whenever I had the opportunity, I tried to do that, like service award luncheons where people got awards, or picnics where I'd bring my kids. Just a lot of those little times when I could involve my family when my kids were younger, or I always like being on the in and knowing as much as I can about what the services are here and what's going on, and so that's always been a little bit of a motivator to me, that I'm always on the forefront of learning what the library is offering, because there's always new and exciting things coming that I could hear about. So a lot of times it was like smaller events like that, or coming when there's big programming going on and taking part in that, and feeling proud at bigger moments, like when we've had improvements that have opened to the public, seeing what we're doing behind the scenes a little bit has been really exciting to me.
I really loved getting to learn about oh my gosh, I wish I had looked up the name of this. Was it the inclusive internship that Joe Marcantonio had? Okay, so the intern that worked with the Teen Center last year and spearheaded the zine project, I thought that was lovely. I got to see the packet that the teens took home as well as the finished products, and I just thought that was so charming, and I just really loved that project. I haven't really been super involved with it or anything, so I don't want to take any credit for it, but I am thrilled about the land acknowledgement project. I think that is so important to be, acknowledging the stewards of the land that we are on, especially since we have a Native American Cultural Center literally across the parking lot. So I'm really glad that the library is working with them to make sure that's done in a way that appropriately honors the local and original tribes.
Do you remember Tim Jarzembski? Well, we had a woman come to the board, and we had no idea what she was there for. But she said to us, "Is it important to you that you can see?" And we looked at her, well, of course, She says, "I want to tell you a story." Now, the woman happened to be a PR person. That was her occupation. But she said she realized she was losing her sight. And she went to a specialist, and the specialist said, "There isn't anything I can do. You're going to lose your sight." Well, she was obviously, no way was she going to accept this. And so she happened to live in our community, and she came to our library. And she was trying to find something that might be done. And Tim Jarzembski was asked by her for help. And he went through the materials and discovered that there was a doctor, and the doctor happened to be in Chicago, who was doing a surgery. And the more she read on it, the more she thought that this might make a difference for her. And so she went to him. He decided that she was a candidate. She had the surgery. Her eyesight was saved. And she came to the library to tell us what our library had done for her, what Tim Jarzembski had done. It was a wonderful story. I don't think I've ever, felt better than that right there.
I really liked taking my daughter to the library for the first time, so that might not be a moment that everyone has or that I shared with others. It was just kind of her and I going to the library, but it was really cool that I had taken advantage of the resources here for so many years, and then now she'll be able to do that, and hopefully she'll understand the importance of leading in her community and know that she needs to take good care of the resources that we have. So that was kind of a cool moment. I also liked, we had a summer book series. Chuck Jones is, I believe, the artist for all of the Looney Tunes, if I'm not mistaken. And so they just did a really great summer reading program. The children were able to see his art, original art, exhibited in the library. And then his son, I believe, or a family member came one evening to present on his artwork, but also to talk to us. And it was like a nice party. We got to learn a lot about Chuck Jones's life and his art, and I just thought that was a really great way to bring together art and literature and the library and have a good time at the same time.
Smaller issues or moments, I gotta tell you, the best moments on the board, the library board for me in the time, were the board colleagues. And learning from Bob Frankel, Bob Lyons, Ruth Jonen, and Debbie Miller, great characters, great knowledge of our institution, coming to board meetings and not feeling attacked by fellow board members, not feeling that you have to defend yourself or the public is going to be angry at board decisions, because you know you have a board that's experienced and you have a board that's listening and you have a board that really cares, because they show that care through what they've done. What they've done in the 40 plus years of service, what they've done in in the product of what we see in our central library and our branches. And so just those memories of sitting at the table and learning from board members. Student trustees, I was part of the group that introduced our student trustees, and I was, I think, on the first interview committee along with Anita Forte-Scott to get our first round of student trustees, bringing in our students to the decision-making process. They don't have a vote on the board, but at the same time they do have a voice, which was great too. And then this space, of course, too. How the library has changed over those years. I can remember taking a tour of this space when it was brand new and open, and just being in awe of what we have. And coming today, right, 6 years later, 7 years later, and seeing, we're still changing, we're still adapting, we're still trying to meet the needs of the community.
I loved our Cook County citizenship ceremonies. So impressive, so emotional to watch new citizens being sworn in after all their hard work, and it literally puts a lump in your throat and your eyes water no matter how many times you saw it. I'm sorry we couldn't work with Cook County, for that anymore. But I'll never forget those. Never forget those. And I also think that any time I was thinking about different things, we've presented over the years where the patrons come to the library for certain events and things. But even on a daily basis, any time our staff engages with the patrons, always turns out well. Always, whether it's a question or it's a big event. Been to so many over the years. That's like our, it's not a secret, the public knows, that's why we get so many compliments, and I think that's very special, because if you come looking for help or you even look like you need help, somebody's going to help you from our staff.
Bus trips are wonderful. I don't know when we're going to have those back, but I was fortunate enough to attend and take some day trips that we had, and I know that they're so popular with so many of our patrons. So those were wonderful to take part of. Those are, I would say, smaller things, not necessarily teeny tiny, because there's a lot of planning and moving parts. A lot of our doors wide open, great programming that we continually have. Comic-Con is very popular. Any of our exhibits that we've had brought in are very thought-provoking and popular as well. I think that we just are a very diverse library, and that we seek out the best things to bring in to engage our patrons, and the best ones are those that make you stop and think. So those are some of the small things. Programming is great too.
Well, I think the planning meetings we had once a year with the pizza, and that was, and we really clicked as a group, and so we fed on each other in terms of ideas, and so that was, that was one of the things that was really impressive.
Okay, that's a great question, and I'd love to respond to that. I have 3, if that's okay. Collaborating on that strategic plan was a true joy. Working on the mission and the vision statements was just a super fun time and brought back all my journalism background, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I think it turned out well. Everything about the strategic plan is working great. A second one is that I was able to present a one book, one community pick to the John Muir School in Hoffman Estates. It was called Black is a Rainbow Color, and that was an amazing experience to go back to the school where I had mentored and present them with the deputy director and executive director to the principal of that school. And now books are given to the 28 schools in D54. Third, there was a fabulous lecture and exhibit of famous local artist Martel Langsdorff, an exhibit of her art and a tour of additional art. And that was presented by you, Jane. And I have to say, the way that you put it all together was beautiful and so insightful, and it's just she is a treasure, and as a resident of the Schweiker House and preserving that, it's really part of our local history. So that was a great moment to be a part of that and to walk around with you as you presented other sculptures as well.
And the one that I think personally gave me the greatest pleasure is we had the opportunity to have naturalization ceremonies at the library. Now, previously, it was all done downtown. And we had a naturalization ceremony, the very first one, subsequently a number of other ones, where you would have 80 people who were going to be naturalized that day. And the very first one, we had a federal judge who gave a speech. And at the end of that speech, which was with the families of all these people, and he's there in his robes, and he said, I just want you to know that I'm a naturalized citizen. And that every single family wanted to pose with him under the American flag with his robes on. After which, the staff had arranged for the League of Women Voters to register them. Now that they were citizens, registered them to vote immediately. And then we had a receiving line where everybody on the board, including the mayors, including a representative, state senator, everybody wanted to meet these people. And then they had refreshments, we had a chance to talk to them. It was a truly memorable day, and to my knowledge, we're still the only library that ever had naturalization ceremonies. And that was exciting.
One of the most important is the naturalization ceremonies that we started several years ago. At the time, we decided that we would like to approach the people at the Immigration Naturalization Services to see if we could have a naturalization ceremony at the library. It was not really something that was being done, and we were hopeful that we would be able to do that. We were not only able to do it, but we did it so well that they asked us to keep doing it over and over and over again. And that, to me, has been one of the most incredible events that I have ever participated in. I've had the opportunity to, be kind of a welcoming speaker at a couple of them, and to see the joy on the faces of people who become citizens, and to know that the library made that event so special. That, to me, is something for which we must be extraordinarily proud.
One of the biggest responsibilities being a trustee is hiring the executive director. And post Mike Madden, I've been involved with every executive director, and I'm happy to say that they've all been excellent, and I've really enjoyed working with them. But when I became president of the board, my first meeting with Stephanie Sarnoff, she announced that she was retiring, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was a big thing for me. And I was able to help lead the board into making our hiring decision of the next executive director. And then again, it happened again when Monica Harris was leaving the board. So we've had that challenge as a board, but we've always been lucky enough to have really great deputy directors that we were able to turn to. And so that's one of my proudest moments, I guess, within the board dynamics. And my proudest moment, I guess, with activities of the library was giving the speech at the immigration ceremony. I got to do that twice. And so new U.S. citizens would come here for that event, and I got to be the keynote speaker and shake their hands, and I was so proud of them, and it was great that the library was able to be involved in that for a while. For a number of years, we were able to do that. And so that was one of my proudest activities with the citizens of Schaumburg Township through the library to interact with them.
I'm proud of a lot of things, but I'm really proud of the employee handbook. I can't take credit for it, but I didn't put it together or anything, but I think that is a huge milestone in having clear policies and expectations for the staff. So that was a big one.
In the mid-90s, we realized that our old library on Pleasant, or Library Lane as it was called then, was inadequate, and that we would have to enlarge the library once again. Also, we would have to buy additional land for more parking. And I can tell you there's nothing less sexy than spending taxpayers' money on land just for the purpose of parking, but it was going to be required. And we had a meeting of the library board and the library staff, and we're talking about what had to be done and the new things that we'd be able to do. And there was a point we realized we were going to have 3 different heating systems in the building, 2 or 3 air conditioning systems. I think we might have gotten away with one move where enlargement of the library where it was only one air conditioning system for the whole building. So it was going to be 2 different air conditioning systems, and we were going to have to completely tear the building apart to rewire it. And Jane O'Brien, who was the head of circulation, laughed and said, wouldn't it be easier to build a new library? Well, I can remember, and I think everyone else in the room thought she was crazy. We had a beautiful library. It was a good library. How could we, walk away from it? But we started to look what had to be done and how easy it would be to do, and that the only place that we get additional parking, we were only going to get so many new spots. And we came back to the idea of let's build a whole new library and start talking about that, and realize that it would make sense. And Just at that time, the shopping center at Schaumburg and Roselle Road that was owned by a fellow who lived in Florida, and he was doing nothing with it, the village of Schaumburg wanted to condemn that property and take it over. And Schaumburg and Roselle is the center, the geographic center of the township. And obviously being where we were just a little bit north and west of it was a good spot to be, but the Schaumburg and Roselle Road itself would be even better. And the village of Schaumburg, when they learned that we were looking at the shopping center, came to us and said, what can we do to help you? The mayor told us the story that he and the village planners had gone to the University of Minnesota and submitted a plan to them to change the downtown of Schaumburg, as it were. And the people at Minnesota were village planners, and they looked at it and they said, your plan, you know, you want to have like an old town center. And they said, yes, that's what we're after. They said, you've got no draw. You have to have something in the town center that draws people. You think of the town centers, it would be the site of the county. There'd be the courthouse. There'd be something that would draw people on a consistent basis. You need something like that. And they realized that our library would fulfill that responsibility. There was a point I thought maybe the mayor was going to sell us the property for $1. You know, that unfortunately was not the case. We would pay a price for it, but it was still one that the village wanted to work with us. And I happened to be president at the time, and we were working on it. We went to their planners and showed them our drawing, because the important thing was this, by being in the old town area, the architectural style of our library had to be a style that would fit between 1890 and 1915. You've only got two. Richardsonian Romanesque, which is the great big blocks of stone and Syrian arches, and you know, not the kind of thing you would try to build anymore. But the other style was prairie style. And we had an architectural company that we told them this is what we were after. And they showed us 3 different drawings. All 3 we didn't like at all. All 3, one looked like a post office, one looked like a school, another looked like a factory. And I was really thinking that we had made a mistake with this company, that they weren't going to be able to do it. And we said that wasn't what we were looking for. And they said, well, we put something out just so you would have a chance to react to it. I said, we want prairie style, and because we knew we had to have 2 stories, I said, look at Walter Burley Griffin's work. He built a number of homes on the North Shore. He was a partner of Frank Lloyd Wright. And he later he and his wife went to Australia, and they designed the capital city for Australia. But he had a prairie style that took into consideration more of a vertical look to it, rather, if you think of the prairie style, basically under Frank Lloyd Wright, is basically horizontal. And he had more that would fit what we were looking for. And they came back with a drawing, which is this building. We did not change a thing. We looked at it and we said, that's what we want. It's beautiful. Some years later, I would meet his grandson, Walter Burley's grandson, and tell him that our library was designed really with his father's work in mind, and he would come and he would visit and he'd be very impressed. Well, I think that this building, and we built the 2 branches as well. And so the fact that we were able to construct 3 different buildings, and they were the quality that we are. And the fact that our library has won the 5-star award for a number of years. I'm very proud to have had my name associated with this library. It's something that I know will always be here. Over the years, our library had 5 trustees that were long-term. And I know there are people who believe very strongly in term limits, but I think in the case of our library, the people who had been on the board for a number of years were on the board for the right reasons and had brought a variety of talent to the board, and I would name them as Debbie Miller, Bob Frankel, Jack Lucas, and Ruth Jonen, and myself. The 5 of us. Others would come and go, but those 5 were there for a long time. And we had a very good board. And with Mike Madden as our director, Mike is one of the finest directors in the library world, in the United States. And there was a point where I had been on the board for 30-some years, and someone said, is there anything that you've been on so long, is there anything you haven't done? I said, I've never hired a new director. And just in the very last years, we hired Stephanie Sarnoff. And she was a good interview. And when we got her as a librarian, we did not think there was much she could do that Mike had been so good. But there was. She brought in a fresh look, and she, I think, really helped the library along. And so we had 2 outstanding librarians in the time that I was on the board.
I was really proud of the way the library handled the pandemic. So in a time when everyone was saying, oh, well, we'll just wait till later, or we can't do that because of this, or the library really said, you know what, we have been working towards this. We know that people are going more online, so we've built our online capabilities. We've created a whole, I don't know if people know this, but the library created a whole nother branch, and that's our online branch. And so we were ready when we weren't expecting it, but we were ready with the infrastructure, albeit electronically, to service our community despite everyone having to stay indoors and stay socially distant from each other. And so I think I was really proud. The library could have said, you know what, we're going to shut down, we're going to kind of not offer the services we're used to offering to the community, we're just going to stay here and wait till this and ride it out. But everyone started thinking like, oh, how can we bring services to people that need them despite our current circumstances? And I thought that was, I took pride in knowing that our library is full of people that are willing to do that.
And the collaboration among the board members. So what the vision for the library looks like, having input from multiple stakeholders. The staff of this library I'm very proud of. That would be a gem. So the library itself is a gem, but the folks that we have here, the people that care for our patrons, the people that really, it's not about us. It's a selfless sacrifice to the community. I mean, the hours folks work, the time people put in to be part of something greater and part of the community. You wouldn't imagine when I was trustee on the board and then I was a staff also, the number of people that said, this person's my favorite person ever. I come to the library because of this person, I can dialogue about this. So I don't care what department it is, at the branches, central, you have those gems, and so I'm very thankful of that, very, very thankful for that.
I think I have to go back to COVID because it just impacted lives so hugely. In the future, people won't remember how afraid people were to come to work, how afraid people were to go to a store. people were afraid of getting sick themselves and then making someone else sick, and nobody understood at that time how it traveled. And I still look at it as an all hands on deck moment where the effort to keep everyone healthy, safe, and yet still provide services, but come up with all new inventive ways to still communicate with people and feel like they're still attached to the library, because we were all literally in our homes. And I think we did a great job. You know, everybody pulled together and said, how do we help the staff? How do we help the patrons? How do we figure out how to maneuver this? And we were working, and it was all, besides, it was staff, board, administration, and government. We had a government piece in there too that we had to work with, and I think we did a phenomenal job.
Right? There's so many. I think the opening of the Hanover Park branch, very proud of that. A lot of the renovations here at the main building, the teen center that I was a part of, the commons downstairs, remodeling of the children's area, opening up the space, making it more conducive to flow and patrons being able to find materials that they're looking for more easily. That's always a great, proud moment. I'm really looking forward to the 60th anniversary coming up, so I know we have a lot of things planned for that. It's amazing to me. And also being a part of the 50th just 10 years ago, that was also very large and very proud times as well. So,
building the central library, that was getting that referendum to pass by 70%, and then having enough to build the other two libraries. It was interesting how we, because we had to make a lot of decisions, and only first the money, we had to have the money in place, but then we had to hire architects. And so what we did was we interviewed architects at their library that they built, and so we had a number of them in the area, and we'd go out and they'd tell us how they built it and what they went through and so forth. And but then I noticed that we had another application of an architect that was new to this particular firm, but the closest she had built a library to was down in Danville, and I liked the way, I don't know, I thought we should take a look at that. Well, the board wasn't interested in driving down to Danville, so I went down on my own, and I talked to the board chairman and the director, and I was really impressed with what this woman had done with that library and how she had got the community where they were really high. So I came back and I told everybody, and so that got Bob Lyons interested, so he went down, and he came back and he was well, that did it, and the whole board went down, and it turned out that we picked that architect, and that was the only time I can remember that the board's opinion was different than the staff. The staff they thought that particular firm was a cookie cutter type of, and we wouldn't get any imagination. But we stuck to it. We argued back and forth, but we finally voted to hire this architect. Afterwards, the staff was very happy with her, so it turned out to be good. Because she really worked well with the staff and how she got them together. And so that whole process, and then we had to interview for the general contractors. So it was a very complicated process with a lot of. And then there were certain technical areas that we had to have some contractors that we had to interview that were chosen independently of the general contractor. So it was a very complicated kind of thing, but it was by far very fulfilling.
Another great question, and this is how I'm going to respond. shortly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, just shocking to all, a relief drive was set up very quickly here at the library. And so many people responded to that. I was tremendously proud that we could do that as quickly. And on one Saturday afternoon, I met a Ukrainian couple, and they were putting in $900 worth of new clothes into the donation bins. And they were so grateful to be able to help in a tangible way. Their family some of their family lived in Kyiv, and they came all the way from Arlington Heights, knowing that our collection bins would be big enough for their donation. So that really touched my heart. I think that just really speaks to the vision of this library and the heart of the community. Along with that is the online lecture that was presented by the programming team here. And it was about Russian-Ukraine history and kind of big maps of the geography, and it was done excellently by a University of Illinois professor at the University of Illinois Chicago. And 200 people, or more than 200 people, signed up for that and watched it live online. I watched it later, and I thought it was so impactful, so educational, and just really, really helped me get a grip on what was going on, so that the library was able to respond to this global crisis so quickly, within a matter of weeks, just a couple weeks. I thought that was just outstanding. And that we have the service of Schaumburg TV, the YouTube way to see the recorded programs.
The setting up of the teen center, the building of the new library, and I would doubt if anybody would have a different opinion who was there at the time.
The thing that I guess I would go back and look at again with a great deal of pride is the decision to move from the old building on Library Lane, what was Library Lane at that time, and to commit to building a brand new library at Town Square. At the time, this was a really muddy, empty parking lot, and to think about what it has turned out to be is really quite special. And the fact that it has become sort of the crown jewel, as at least the way I look at it, the crown jewel of Schaumburg is Schaumburg Township is this building, and how important it is that we recognize the commitment that the community made to give us the money to build the building and to staff it and to provide the services and programs that we have been able to provide. That was a leap of faith in many ways, and I think the board deserves credit for that, but the staff does, and the people of this community deserve a great deal of credit for taking a look at what we wanted to do and saying, okay, we think this is going to work out all right. We're going to let you have the money. And that really, to me, is an indication of the depth of commitment on the part of the community, the residents of the community. Whether they ever step foot in the library or not really isn't the issue. People saw the importance of this facility to the overall wealth and goodness of the community and the people. To me, when I look at the library, I look at it from two perspectives, people and buildings. And I was blessed to work with trustees who were really great when it came to the buildings and the finance part. I felt that my area of ability was in the area of personnel and the people part. And you can have a beautiful building, but if you don't have great people, it's just a shell. So to me, it has been the staff, the trustees, the community, everybody who has worked together to make this library such an incredible place. And
Yes, at one of the last board meetings about a year ago, when I had been here 10 years, I came up with 10 years as a trustee and 10 memories of over the years of things I've done and things that were going on at the library. And I'll call it now 10 plus 1, because now it's been 11 years. But if you don't mind, I'll just go through it real quick. I just wanted to say how proud I am of all the work I've done and all the things that the library's done. And there aren't that many things in my life that I've done for 10 years. Like, it's been a big commitment for me, and I've really enjoyed it. So anyway, in 2010, I began working with the Citizens Input Committee, discussing the future of the library. And we were talking about how to pay for the capital assessments for different work that we knew was going to be coming up, and how to get future funding and to get community input for the library. And that led me to running for office and being elected in 2011. And I was proud to serve with Bob Lyons, Ruth Jonen, Debbie Miller, Bob Frankel, Anita Forte-Scott. And we were looking at going to referendum, but we were lucky that we didn't have to at the time. So that was something we thought, but we didn't end up doing that. And then in 2012, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the library. And we all wore the blue 50th anniversary shirts. I know we were reminiscing about that. I still have mine. And we opened the teen place, and that was when I became treasurer of the board. And I've held multiple times all the different offices on the board, so I won't mention them all, but that was the first one that I did. And I'm a CPA, so that seemed fitting. They were happy to have somebody else doing it. Bob Frankel used to always do it. And then in 2013, I have a fun memory. A group of board members and staff took a trolley downtown to attend the ALA meeting in Chicago. That was really fun and great to be at a big meeting like that. It was just very exciting. And some people from the library that time, and I know many, many, many times, they've presented. So we got to see some of the staff at the library present. In 2014, I marched in the 4th of July parade and the September Fest parades. And I loved doing that because I got to hang out with the staff when we were waiting for the float to go, and I got to represent the library and interact with the public. And I also got to be a judge for Battle of the Bands in Town Square, and I really enjoyed doing that, and my kids helped me a little bit with that. I did it more than once. It was fun. In 2015, I was sworn into my second term on the board by my mother, Mary Wroblewski, who's the Schaumburg Township supervisor, so she was able to come in and swear me in, which was exciting. 2016 was my first year as the president of the board, and I got to assist in the grand opening ribbon cutting for the Commons AV renovation. And I already mentioned this, but that was when Stephanie Sarnoff decided she was going to retire. So she gave us some notice, which was nice. So I helped lead the board in the process of finding a new executive director, which ended up being Monica Harris. In 2017 and 2018, I got to be the speaker, like I mentioned already, at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Naturalization Ceremonies. So that was a real highlight. 2019, I started my third term on the board, and we named Annie Miskovich as the new executive director. And we've really been blessed by her leadership. And we're also blessed that we had such great deputy directors that were well-trained and able to step in. And I was also the judge that year for the September Fest parade, so that was exciting. In 2020, we finished the first floor renovations, and we had one of the highlights of activities that year was Min Jin Lee. Her book Pachinko was the One Book, One Community selection. And my book club read it also. One thing that I like to do at the library is get books for my book club. We do book club in a bag, and also just finding other titles, because I'm an avid reader, and that's just a wonderful service that the library offers. And in 2021, this last year, As secretary and vice president of the board, I was the one that got to swear in the new trustees. So I was able to swear in and welcome Anita Forte-Scott, Emily Gilbert, Amy Mueller, and Carole Pye. And so that was an honor for me. And just sort of a theme of rejuvenation with the board, that over time the trustees change, but it's important to keep people that have the best interest of the library in mind, that are active at the library, that are passionate about it, and I definitely see that. We've had a really good dynamic currently with the board and in the past. So it's important to have trustees that have some experience and also some new people with new ideas, and we have a really good dynamic going. So that was my 10 plus information that I shared at a recent board meeting.
Well, thank you.
I'm just so proud of our library. I truly think that the staff is doing a wonderful job with the collections and the programming, and I just really feel that the library is so important to the community. I get to benefit from that as a patron and a resident, but also I get to see my daughter growing up and using different parts of the library, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it.
I think that's it.
I've just been so impressed. I mean, 60 years, right, of the library. And so I am in my 40th year. And so it's older than I am. It's been around, and so many people have come through our doors. I think the statistic is about 1 million people come through our doors every single year. And to know that this is a community establishment, we serve demographics across all ages and across all groups of people. And I think that you don't always see that in all government agencies. With schools, you'll see it with children and parents, with the village. A lot of homeowners will often engage the village. But our library engages all people. From the moment you're born, my son right now, he's 3 months, he's participating in the books before kindergarten and alongside his sister, and then all the way up to all of the seniors we serve. And even if they're not able to come into our doors, we go to them in our outreach programs. And so you just see how many people have been able to be served by our library for 60 years, and here's to 60 more.
Just like to say thank you for the time. Thanks for what we're doing and having this opportunity. 60 years is amazing. I think we might be opening up the time capsules at this year or a few years in
Next
the
year.
Next year. Looking forward to see, because I remember when things were put in that time capsule. Looking to see that. Those board colleagues, great. I can remember Bob Frankel, Bob Lyons, Ruth. Those folks, those stalwarts that would say, we kept politics out of this library. We kept, there's other institutions that folks have come in and said, hey, I want to make this part of a political agenda and hire my people. That has never happened here in the library. And it's because of the strong library trustees, our directors, our community that says, no, that's not what this is about. This is about an institution that helps our community. But the partnerships that this library has in our community is another thing that's I'm continuously amazed about. The number of partnerships within government, intragovernment, business worlds, you name it. The connections that are made on the behalf of our patrons and the community members is remarkable.
I love my work. I take it seriously because it's become a community institution. The roles of libraries changing. It's part of the heart of the township, people's community libraries. I feel it is a trusted mission to take care of it, to guard it.
That also is a very good question. Just that, to be a library trustee, it's indicative of exactly what those two words are. You are trusted with the library. And it's not, again, just the materials or or the things that we check out that we know when we're a user of the library. It's our employees and our staff that we're entrusted with. It's our buildings and facilities that we're trusted with. It's the taxpayers' monies, mine and yours, that we need to make sure we're good stewards of. And so it's really proud. I feel very great amount of pride in being a library trustee and letting people know that I'm a great advocate for that, and that I see that in my fellow trustees throughout all the years as well as the employees and the staff that have meetings and are seeing the patrons and the public every single day. So I would say that those things make me very happy and proud to be a Schaumburg Township Library District trustee.
Really glad of my time on the board. I thought it was really very fulfilling, but it was time for me to leave. Finally called it in 2007. But I was really very happy with the 34 years I had on the board. It was a very fulfilling experience.
I'd just like to quickly say thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you for this opportunity to serve the library and to serve the township. And my 1-year anniversary is coming up in 2 weeks, and time has just flown. It has been such a joy and a delight, and I'm learning so much and want to continue to learn. Thank you.
It has been it was a remarkable 40 years. I am extremely proud of what we were able to accomplish and that I was part of it. That's all.